Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, August 3rd, 4:04 p.m., and I would like to call the meeting of the Transportation Commission to order. So we'll start with roll call. Commissioner Cruikshank.
I am present. Happy to be here.
You're welcome. Commissioner Hanson. I believe he said he was going to be out. Commissioner Koenig.
Present.
I am here, Julie Lead, Chair. And in for Kate Morley with Mountain Lion is Ann Dunno, to my right. Welcome, Ann. Right. And Commissioner Kraft. I'm getting a note that says it's difficult to hear me. Maybe I just need to get a little closer. Is that better, Shannon?
A little bit. It's almost like your mic isn't on.
All right. I'll speak up.
That's a lot better. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And I wanted to note that Jeff Bauman is out of town, and we have Steph Santana here. Thank you, Steph, for supporting Transportation Commission, and Martin and Dave, and Reed was here a moment ago. So thank you, and Shannon, welcome, city team. All right, so at this time, I would like to open it up for public comment. So at this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within the commission's jurisdiction that is not on the meeting agenda. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits us from discussing or taking action on an item that is not on the prepared agenda. However, we may respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review the matter, or ask the matter that be placed on a future agenda. To address items that are not on the agenda, now would be the time. I do not see anyone in the audience. Do we have anyone online? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to approval of minutes. These meetings are recorded, and that's actually a good reminder. I do want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded, and those are logged. You are welcome to go back to any of those recordings, and city staff can direct you to those recordings should you have questions. So moving on to new business, but before we do, I would like to I'd like to rearrange the agenda for tonight. So I'm looking for somebody to support this. And what I would like to do is continue with item A, which is commission on council salaries. But after that, I would like to move up the appointments for bicycle advisory and pedestrian advisory committee to be the second agenda item, to be agenda item B. Do I have a motion to rearrange the agenda as described?
I move we reset the agenda as described.
Thank you, Commissioner Kraft. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Cruikshank. So that will change our agenda. Thank you very much. All right. So first order of business is commission on council salaries, and I'd like to welcome Shannon Anderson to discuss what the request is. But we will be looking for a commissioner to serve on this this commission for council salaries. So we will be making an ask. I will be making an ask to the commissioners to consider an appointment to that commission. So welcome, Shannon. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lead. Good to see you. So just wanted to briefly explain what it is that we're looking to do. There is a section of our city code that talks about mayor and council salaries. And in this code, it talks about how we comprise the Citizen Commission on Council Salaries that review the current salaries and make recommendations. The Transportation Commission is one of 5 commissions that have been identified in the makeup of the Citizens Commission, in addition to 4 community members, 2 at large, and then 2 that are from the human resources profession. So we did get a request to review council salaries some time ago, but we've recently been able to fill our 4 community positions. And so that's what's led us to come back to each of the 5 commissions and find out who you would like to represent your commission on the Citizen Commission for Council Salaries. To tell you a little bit about the role, typically 2 to 3 meetings, they're about an hour in length. We will provide to you what other mayors and councils are experiencing in the form of compensation. We'll talk about CPI, inflation, so that the commission has a good understanding of kind of what we're seeing in other areas, get some benchmark data so that you can make a recommendation moving forward. So that's a little bit about the time as well as the role. So if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them, and would just be looking, as Chair Lead stated, for 1 member of this commission to join us on council salaries.
Thank you, Shannon. And when would this start, and what is the expected duration? I heard 2 to 3 meetings, but yeah, what is the duration and when?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Chair Lead. We're looking to begin in September. We should have all of our commission members identified this month. Then we'll reach out to all of the individuals to see what dates they're available and select the commonalities. Again, I don't anticipate this would go past October. Certainly we want to be flexible to the commission members' when are they accessible, when are they available for those meetings, but my hope is it wouldn't span past a 2-month period of time.
All right, excellent. Any questions, commissioners, for Shannon? All right. So I would look to Commissioner Cruikshank, Commissioner Hansen, who is not with us this evening, Commissioner Koenig, and Commissioner Kraft, to ask if any one of the 4 of you are interested in serving on the Commission on Council Salaries.
I happily nominate Commissioner Hansen, since he's not here and can't defend himself.
Way to break the ice, Commissioner Kraft. It is not a commitment that I can take on, and I believe Mountain Line is not in a position to serve in that particular role, given their relationship with the city, and that Kate is not here.
Madam Chair, this is Brandon. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. If the meetings would happen to be like late afternoon, early evening, I could do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cruikshank. Shannon, is that possible?
Sorry, I realized I put myself on mute. Yeah, I think we could meet that requirement. I'm just writing myself a note, so as I start to reach out, I keep that in mind. Yeah, I think that could be doable, because like I said, we want to pick a time that everyone's going to be available on the commission itself.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Cruikshank. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I was just saying that'll work fine.
Thank you for volunteering. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I make a motion to appoint Commissioner Cruikshank to the Commission on Council Salaries. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Commissioner Kraft. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank
Aye.
you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Lee.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, next up, Martin. We moved up your agenda item, so this is BAC and PAC appointments.
So we have
one appointment, new appointment to BAC for your consideration, and 2 reappointments, one to PAC and one to BAC. They're up on the screen, and we've indicated the terms. Just real quickly, by way of background, we have currently 1 vacancy on the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We have a couple of applications, but I've worked through 2 of them so far and found that the applicants no longer live in Flagstaff and therefore are not eligible. I've not made contact with the last one, but hopefully she still lives here and is still interested in serving. So that will come before you. If we make contact with her, that will come before you at a future meeting. BAC is a little bit more complicated. We have 2 current vacancies. We have 1 new appointment tonight to fill one of those vacancies. We have a handful, more than a handful, I guess, of new applications, I think on the order of 8 or 10. We also have 3 current BAC members whose terms are expiring actually this summer, who are not eligible for reappointments. We'll have to find new members for them. Members of the BAC formed a subcommittee to review the applications that they did have on hand and have made some preliminary recommendations pending reaching out to the members again to confirm that they still are eligible to serve and are still interested in serving. So again, at a future meeting, you may see recommendations from BAC for new members to replace, to fill the 1 vacancy and to replace the 3 members. But in the meantime, our item tonight is the 2 reappointments and the 1 appointment. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. Now, do we need to do these separately, or can we do them all in one motion, should we choose after discussion here?
I say all in one motion.
Okay, thank you. For our reappointments, for Jody Norris and for Estella Hollander, can you speak to their attendance and participation, please?
I would, both excellent. I'd say without hesitation that they are regular attendees. I can generally count on them, and they're good contributors to the conversation.
Okay, excellent. And have you had an opportunity to speak with Samantha Meyer?
I have. I think if you read her her responses in her application, I think it's very well thought out and fairly thorough, and she obviously has a strong interest in improving multimodal transportation in Flagstaff and biking in particular. And we've been involved with her on a few other things over the years, and I would say that she has a very strong interest in cycling and making it better.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions about the appointments or questions for Martin?
They sound great.
All right. Then I would look for a motion to make those appointments, please.
I'll make a motion to appoint Jody Norris to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, as well as Samantha Meir and Estella Hollander to the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
All right. And can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. So motion by Commissioner Koenig, second Commissioner Kraft, and all of those in favor? Aye.
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 All right. Motion carries. Well, we welcome Jody, Samantha, and Estella to the PAC and BAC. Look forward to working with them. And please, when you speak with Jody and Estella, Martin, thank them profusely for all of the work that they have done and their continued interest in moving forward. That's fantastic. Right, let's move to, well, what is on the agenda is item B, but the airport plan. So this is for information and discussion. No formal action is required. And Steph, is this one that you are presenting on, the airport plan?
No, we have Barney from the airport
Oh,
online
wonderful.
to, I believe, present on this.
Welcome, Barney Helmick.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Steph, are you going to share this PowerPoint or will this be shared by myself?
I will do whatever you would prefer.
I'd prefer if you do that way. It's easier for me to see also.
One second while I'm loading it.
Okay. And while she's loading that, I do want to let the commission know that it actually intended to share this back in January. Unfortunately, myself, I had some issues, so I was unable to attend, and then our scheduling pushed it out to this date. Anyways, what I'm sharing today is the Flagstaff Pulliam Airport paid parking program update.
Let me pause you 1 second, Barney. It's not
Sure.
showing on our things in here. Let me figure
Okay.
this out.
And while Steph is doing that, Barney, I don't know if we have a couple of new folks on the commission, and I think if you could maybe introduce yourself and your role with the city of Flagstaff and Flagstaff Airport, that would be great.
Sure. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Barney Helmick. I am the airport director for your Flagstaff Pulliam Airport. Have been here for about 12 years. In fact, 12 years at the end of this month. And we've been working for some time, actually started working on this program 2015. And we actually have a substantial amount of the parking lot finished. We've been working with council on getting a approval for a paid parking system and rates, but want to share with as many commissions as possible the information that's going to come forth here on how we've got to those rates and where we're looking at with the existing parking lot. I don't see it up on the screen yet.
I think Steph is almost there. We're seeing it on our screen, but I don't know if it's streaming yet.
Not yet. Modern technology, it's a marvel.
Sorry, this is blowing my mind why it's not working on both.
It reminds me of going to a rural area with a cell phone and you have to stand on a picnic table with one hand up. Now we're getting it. There we go.
I was just about ready to share my screen.
That's weird.
All right. Thank you, Barney. Commissioner Cruikshank and Koenig, can you see the presentation? Yep,
Sure can.
thumbs up. All right. Please go ahead.
Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. What we're looking at here is the existing parking lot and where the new parking lot was originally identified. The existing parking lot, depending on which survey you look at, is between 375 and 385 spaces. It was built in 2 phases, and it was actually thought to be able to handle our needs to 2025. As I said, about 2015, started working with the budget committee and finance teams to look for a way to expand it because we found that for during the summer months and the peak holiday seasons, that existing lot just did not handle the demands back then. In 2007, the master planning process identified that parallelogram gray area that you see in the upper right of that picture as to where we would put a new parking lot. A lot of the demands were because of increased employments through the years, additional air service, and people who decided to use our free parking lot that were not patrons of the airport. Next slide, please. We worked with several groups to put together a design for the new parking lot. You see the project site there. The new site will have about 413 spots, an internal walkway that goes from that site around the existing Pulliam Drive to the terminal. It has a headlight wall, which is to block vehicles from turning on their headlights and peering right out onto J.W. Powell. An 8-foot wide sidewalk to the terminal, which has had some artwork put in it, and it's going to be an art walk that has currently got some medallions in there that will match with a cut steel wall that has various areas of interest for our community in there. There are going to be 2 entry and exit lanes into this parking lot, and it'll have a paid parking system installed when we get that system. We actually had hoped to have that system in place this summer, but have had delays for various different reasons. The original vendor was unable to meet the timelines. We went through a different process to try to get a vendor in, and discovered there's going to be some things in the method for getting that were not compatible for what we wanted to do. Next slide, please. You're seeing some of the construction work there, and I want to share the cost in 2 different aspects. The new lot and the upgrades to the existing lot are going to cost about $4.9 million, which has been borrowed from the general fund. We're expecting that using Park Flag employees, we're going to have an annual cost of about $80,000 for staffing, an approximate increase for utilities of $10,000. We contract the snow management in these parking lots and are anticipating about $19,000 annually for that. The hardware and software for the paid parking system is going to be an annual cost of about $48,000, and credit card fees of about $90,000, and a set aside of $20,000 for annual maintenance, for a total annual cost of $288,000. Next slide, please. Some of the benefits of this new lot will increase the existing inventory. We'll have bus cutouts, which we did for a brief period of time have Mountain Line coming out here through a grant that they obtained. Not able to keep that grant, unfortunately, and surprisingly, it did have a good amount of usage on it. There'll be electric vehicle charging in there, and we also are in our existing lot about to open up. Hopefully next week it'll be installed and inspected and opened up for electric vehicle charging. There's going to be bicycle paths along Pulliam Drive added with this. The revenues from this will pay for the debt service and the ongoing costs. And once the debt service of the 4.9 million is paid off, then we'll use that towards future operational needs and maintenance items at the airport. Next slide, please. What you're looking here is we reached out to some other airports to see what kind of systems they had in place. Prescott does not have a paid parking system. They do not see the volume that we do. Laughlin Bullhead also does not have a paid parking system, but Laughlin Bullhead does not have daily service. They have what they call charter flights that are tied to the casino needs there. Montrose was a similar size airport as us, and they are looking at a daily rate of $8, a monthly rate of $95, and $750 annual. St. George is also similar to us, and they have a $7 daily. Durango, again, similar to us, and we often reach out to them because they have similar climate issues that we do. And we got some really good feedback on them on their system that they have in place. They have a $2 an hour or $2 hourly rate and $7 daily rate. We did include Tucson and Sky Harbor, even though they're not really compatible to us. And you'll see their rates that Sky Harbor rate is for the East Economy. It's not for the parking lots up adjacent to the building because they're substantially higher. So we did not include those. Next slide, please. This is what we have put in place that would go into effect, hopefully January of 2023. That is not a lockdown date because we have not got contract in place for the new vendor, nor do we have a date when those will come into place. But what we did get through council was an approval for the first hour free, a $2 an hour charge after that, up to $7 a day in what we're calling the terminal lot, which is the existing lot. And then the new lot is going to be called an economy lot, which will be $5 a day. And then we have the approval rate for a $42 weekly rate in the terminal lot and $30 weekly rate in the economy lot. Even though we have approvals for those, until we get the new system in, we're not sure if the system will allow us to do those type or how those would be implemented. But we wanted to make sure we had that in place in case we can do those rates. What you're seeing also is a July 1 of 2024, an approximate 18-month out rate increase so that we would have the ability, because we're not sure how, we would like to manage these two lots and keep them balanced. So that would allow us to, at July of 2024, do an increase, or we could even do a decrease in one of the two lots to try to keep them balanced out. We just wanted those in place for approval from council. Next slide, please. What you're looking here is a financial plan for this. And we looked at the first 5 months would generate approximately $365,000 on 400 cars balanced between the two rates of the two lots. That would give us enough to cover the operational expenses for that time frame of $120,000 with an ending balance of $245,000, which would roll over into the next fiscal year 23-24. Looking at revenues for that year of $893,520, or a total revenue balance during that fiscal year of $1,138,520. We would take $330,000 out of that towards the recovery of the debt service, $288,000 towards operational expenses, and $500,000 worth of capital expenses and improvements that were not able to get done in the first go around of these projects, with a total usage of funds of $1,118,000 and $20,520 left over going into the next year. I'm not going to read each of these, but you'll see that we have laid it out to cover all the expenses and towards the debt service going out over those next few years. Now, if we do see additional revenues during that time frame, it would be split out between operational expenses and the debt service in an attempt to get the debt service paid down quicker. Questions about what you see on this slide here?
Questions, commissioners?
Hey, Barney, it's Nick Kraft here.
Hi, Nick.
How you doing?
Good. Long time no see.
I'm assuming from what you're showing that there's no federal funds for parking lots at airports.
There are federal funds, but if we use federal funds for this program, we could not collect revenues, and we would probably not get a grant for a paid for a parking lot for many, many years out, because it's a low priority grant and we need the program now. So it's a two-part thing there. Can't use it to get revenues, and we probably wouldn't get it for years out.
Okay. And will the economy lot be used for anything but, you know, passenger parking, such as rental cars or anything like that?
It's not intended for that. We currently have a lot that we're using as an overflow lot that is for the rental cars, and it will be reverted back to rental cars only. We're also looking at some other things with their next leases on getting some revenues from those cars to expand their needs, but we do not intend to use this for rental car lot.
Okay. And will there be like human staffing or automation, do you think, in terms of collecting fees?
The system will be automated what we're looking at with bringing Park Flag out is twofold. To service if we have difficulties with the system during the daytime hours, and also to cover for those people who choose to not park within our system and park illegally, like we see in many cases now, where they would be ticketed.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question. So, you're hoping the people that parked illegally in terminal will end up in economy instead?
That is correct.
I gotcha. Well, that looks great. Thanks for your presentation.
And I think there might be one more slide.
And
I have some
Commissioner
questions on that one as well.
Okay, we can go back to that slide.
Okay.
Yep. First, Commissioner Cruikshank and then Commissioner Koenig.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Barney. I appreciate that. I do have a quick question about the line item there that just says airport operations that goes into effect in 2025. Maybe you said something about that, but could you clarify what that expense is for?
It's a good question. I don't believe I did go that far over. Our current budget is oftentimes covered. We do not generate enough revenue to cover all of our day-to-day operational costs, which can be anything from salaries to maintenance of the runway, light bulbs, you name it, that we daily deal with. This is be going into offsetting that, so we do not draw from the general fund. We're also looking at a couple other revenue projects out here, such as we have a 31.45 acre project that we're working with Gentera to hopefully develop for business offices. But this would be going into that cost. If we get to a point where we're generating enough revenue that wouldn't be needed for this, we would go back and look, is there other ways that we could use this towards other capital improvements? Through the years, we've not been able to do as much capital work as we'd like to, such as we've been able to with the last couple of years with CARES, do some maintenance upkeep on our aircraft storage hangars. That's going to expire here in about 2 years, and we could use this for that if we do not have daily operational needs for it.
Oops. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Koenig?
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation, Barney. I guess I had a similar question about the airport operations fund. I guess, okay, but first I'll go into, so you said there's further capital improvements needed. Are those needed for the new lot, or are those capital improvements to the old lot once the new lot opens?
Those are for the old lot. We that lot was built in 2 phases, and the lot that's closest to the terminal building needs to be resurfaced. It'll have to be done in phases, but we really can't go into that until we get this new lot opened up, because we would not have enough space in there. That'll be one of the things that'll go into it. We're also looking at down the road, and this one I think is way down the road. There's been a direction from the city manager's office to look at some kind of roofing over that terminal lot, and that's going to be difficult to do, but eventually some of these costs could go towards that if we can figure out how to do it. And the reason I say it's difficult is we still have to get snow equipment in there. We do have to get emergency equipment in there, and we're not sure on what that roof structure would look like to allow us to get that kind of stuff in and out of there, the larger equipment that would be needed.
Okay. One of my other thoughts was this airport operations fund. I don't know, the extra money that's generated from the parking. It seems like it could be an opportunity to put that money towards a bus connection to the airport. As you said, the pilot seemed to go well. We don't have that funding anymore. If we have extra money here, that seems like an appropriate place to put it if we're getting money from parking to help offset and reduce parking as well.
That is not off the table. It is stuff that we've looked at along with Northern Arizona Healthcare, assisting with some offsets for those because the new routes would go by the hospital. So yes, that has been discussed. A lot of that is going to have to wait until we get through some of the debt service before we get it. That's where you see an outlying year of 25, 26 for that money coming up. Between now and then, that may be the primary direction we go with too. Um, a lot of discussion input's going to have to go into that between now and then.
Okay. My other question, you mentioned that's important to keep the lots balanced, and some of the questions around the pricing structure. You know, it seems like there's a great surplus here towards the end of this. I recognize it's good not to be more expensive than other regional airports, but Flagstaff is a special place, and I think that sometimes it's nice to keep Flagstaff special. And so, you know, targeting the same price as Durango or the same price as other places, I don't see why we can't target having a cheaper price because it's airport parking. We don't really want to encourage people to use the airport as much as possible.
That's very true. So understand that those rates, the first year rates are pretty much locked in, but the second year rates is just giving us the flexibility to say, okay, we're still getting way too much usage in the terminal lot and not enough in the other. Maybe we reduce the economy lot, or vice versa. Maybe we're getting too much usage in the economy lot and we reduce one of them, and we would look at maybe $1 increments, and then we readjust that in 12 to 18 months after that. But we needed that flexibility so that we can flex those one way or the other.
Okay. Thanks, Barney.
Right, we have one more question, comment. Interim Commissioner Dunno.
Thank you, Chair Lead. Barney, thanks for the presentation. So I don't know if you heard the introduction. I am Ann Dunno. I'm the Capital Project Manager at Mountain Line. I'm sitting in on behalf of Kate Morley from Mountain Line. And to your both of your dialogue about sort of the status of the bus route planning, I did want to just share that, as Barney stated, there is still ongoing discussions about trying to identify a feasible route that would service the new hospital and then over to the airport. My understanding is really where it sits is we have to develop a plan that the parties that work out with funding that actually can be supported by the city's budget process. So, and that timeline we're looking at is towards the end of this year, 2022, working through our Flagstaff in Motion plan that we're currently, it's our 5-year transit plan. So I believe there's definitely been some detailed routes with service hours and operational and capital costs that have been shared with the airport and the hospital, and those discussions are going on, but I did want to just reiterate that we are working on that. And Barney, if you are interested in finding a little bit more about what happened with the grant for the BRT, there's some history there. Please reach out to Kate Morley. She can share a little bit more about why that funding, we weren't able to continue pursuing that at the time. So thanks.
Thank you, Ann.
Good questions, good comments. All right, I think back to you, Barney.
I want to thank you all for allowing me to present this today. If there's any changes, I will be coming back at a later date. Excellent questions. We appreciate all your input. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Barney. Right. With that, we will go to our next agenda item, which is the Bikeways plan. This is information and discussion. No formal action is required. And Martin Ince, I believe this is your item, so take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I might suggest that you consider reordering the agenda again in the interest of staff efficiency, since there are a number of people here who are for the capital presentation. So it's your discretion. You may want to take that item first, and I can wait to go after them.
That is certainly fine with me. If I could just get a nod and an okay from commissioners. Virtual, thumbs up, thumbs up. Ann's good. Commissioner Kraft, that's okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that's fine.
Mr. Henry, are you ready to go in there?
All right, so this is the Capital Improvements Program Summary 5-year plan. This is also for information and discussion. No formal action is required. And Trevor Henry, the Capital Improvements Engineer, will be presenting this item. So welcome, Trevor. Welcome, Trevor.
He may be on his way down the hall. I think we might have surprised him.
I have a few seconds of some comic relief here then. Well, I'll take this moment to commend Steph. So I was out at the farmer's market on a Sunday morning and bumped into Steph, and she was taking counts at a key intersection based on requests from the community to evaluate crosswalks downtown. So she thought about it and said, you know what? A busy time would probably be Sunday mornings during Flagstaff Farmer's Market, and was out there spending her weekend doing pedestrian and traffic counts for safety for the community. So thank you, Steph.
Thanks, Julie. It was fun.
He's got 10 seconds.
Did you count dogs?
I did not. I should have.
All right, we're gonna move on. Bikeway's plan, he'll have to wait till we're finished. Might be too late, Trevor. Are you ready? Because we reordered the, Martin asked if you could go first. But then we couldn't find you. All right. So we're back to the capital improvements plan. Welcome, Trevor, Henry. Please go ahead.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner members in person and in virtual land. My name is Trevor Henry. I am the Capital Improvements Engineer for the City of Flagstaff. And today I would like to just kind of give you an overview, brief overview of the Capital Improvements Program, the 5-year summary. I think I understand we have about 20 minutes, so I'm going to do my best to do about a half day's worth of information in about 20 minutes. So I will do my best.
Before you get started, I just want to
Yes.
make sure that commissioners that are joining by Teams can see the presentation. Starting with program categories, the first bullet.
I can't.
Commissioner Kraft can't, they cannot see it.
Just to confirm one more time, can you guys see online now?
Negative. Now we can.
See a thumbs up. All right.
Okay, I'll continue. So here is our presentation for this afternoon, and what we're going to do is try to go over the summaries, the actual summary itself, and we'll talk about some categories that are included within the CIP, or I'm going to call it CIP because it's just a little easier to mention that because it's a long capital improvements program, 5-year summary. So I will just refer to it as the CIP going forward. So we'll talk about the categories that make up the CIP. I'm going to talk about the other 5, and then we'll focus later on the actual streets and transportation. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual components that make up the CIP with regards to estimate, budget, and out years. So right now, kind of giving you a quick look at what our total plan is for fiscal year 23 is we're looking at $657 million is what the CIP will be for this coming year. And that includes everything, all the categories. We'd like to talk about a little bit about the timeline on how the CIP is planned and kind of developed in a yearly process. And then finally, we'll go over some factors that kind of help identify, plan, maybe program what goes into the CIP. So here are those 6 categories that I mentioned earlier. The first one is general government. Those are 5 subcategories, which is the general fund, the library, parking district, sustainability, and capital projects that are funded through a bond. And typically these are unrestricted revenues, and these projects are usually not long-term. And I'm going to skip transportation and streets, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit. Water services consist of 4 subcategories, and those are drinking water, wastewater, reclaimed, and stormwater. And those revenues come from an enterprise fund that water services is set up for. They also come up with funds or revenues through a capacity fees, which are more towards a development. Next is BBB funds, which is bed, board, and beverage. And those funds come entirely from the BBB tax. And those are the arts and science, recreation, and beautification. And the last 2 are solid waste. And that is also an enterprise fund on where the revenues are generated. And airport itself, I think you heard from Barney a little earlier, and then those are funds that typically come from their enterprise, and they're usually ongoing or one-time revenues. All right, so here's an example sheet or page from the actual CIP, and we're going to cover kind of the estimate, the budget, and the out years. But what we have here is a snapshot of the streets and transportation for this year. And I apologize, I don't have the actual full final version of the CIP as the budget is still being finalized with finance, so it's not actually available at the moment because the budget book is not publicly available as well. So this is just a snapshot of what we have right now. So the first component is what we call the estimate. And the estimate is essentially the reconciliation of the previous year's budget after they look at carry forwards, after they look at project completions, and then reappropriations. So that's been in how the estimate is developed and looked at. So in this case, we're looking at fiscal year 22, the estimate, which is the blue box. The next is the actual budget. So in fiscal year 23, we have a new budget that has been assessed, has been valued, has been programmed, and that is the actual budget for this current fiscal year. And that includes everything that was in future years or that might have been brought forward, or they could have been estimates of previous projects that have been pushed out. So there's just a lot of little nuances that have to go into figuring out how the budget is actually developed for the current fiscal year. And then the last component is the out years, which is the green box. So those are actually not real funds, but they're appropriations. So in future years, a project can be designated or it can be identified, planned, but it's not actually funded. but it's just appropriations. And it's typically the city doesn't have the funds available at the moment. So earlier I showed you the total plan amount. The city does not have $657 million in a bank somewhere in somebody's desk. So it's just appropriations for the out years. And please remember the blue box, the orange box, and the green box as we go forward. So here is the streets and transportation category, and it's comprised of 6 subcategories, and we'll kind of go through them here in a little bit. But the first is HERF, which is Highway User Revenue Funds, and that typically comprises of the annual street maintenance program as well as Sunnyside. So those are examples of projects that are within HERF. And HERF is basically revenues that come from the state level taxes. So an example would be gas tax. That would go into how some of these funds or how HERF can come about. Next is the transportation tax, safety and streets. And this is what we refer to as the old tax. If you remember, back in 2000, this tax was approved, I believe under Proposition 406, I think.
419,
That's the new tax.
that's the new tax.
Yeah.
Oh, 406 is the old one.
Right.
Yeah.
The old tax. And that was developed back in 2000 and it ran for 20 years. It just expired in 2020. But this is the old tax. Some of those projects are Schweitzer Turquoise Roundabout, La Plaza Vieja improvements, and then the Beulah University realignment. So those are some of the projects that fall under that subcategory. We have road repair and street safety. And this is bond 416, I believe, which was appropriated in 2014, which was for the repair of roads to light condition. And we're using those currently. If you remember some projects in the past, Zuni Drive, Lockett Road, LaRue Street, and then currently we're working on bundle 4 and 5, which is Coconino Estates in phase 1 and 2, and then West Flag improvements. So under road repair and street safety, those are projects that have been just set aside. We have Lone Tree Overpass, and that project is currently underway. It was part of Proposition 420, and that started approximately 2 years ago. Actually, it was approved in 2018, and then funding started in 2019. That actual project will be completed construction-wise in 2026, but the payment, the funding for it, will go for another 20 years. Then we have Proposition 419, also affectionately known as the new tax. And that was approved in 2018. It began in 2020 after the old tax was finished or completed. And so some of those projects there are components of John Wesley Powell, Butler Fourth improvements, Lockett Fourth roundabout, Bike Ped program, Foots program, and the First Mile, Last Mile. So there's a lot of projects that have been identified under this new tax, Proposition 419. And then the last one to mention is general improvements in partnership. I mentioned this one because this is an opportunity for the city to partner with other agencies on any projects that we feel are of interest to the city, but maybe with another agency such as ADOT or the county. So these are just opportunities to help us with that. So that's a category. And that is shown there as HSIP, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Basically, it's a safety project that we're looking at. And then also traffic engineering also uses a little bit of that for their operations. So this is the first component of the CIP. If you remember, it's the blue box. So we're looking at fiscal year 22. In this current year, we are identifying about 15.5 million that was appropriated for projects that were in FY22 as budgeted, but then were reconciled. Of that 15.5 million, HERF had 810,000, transportation tax, the old tax was about a little over $1 million. And then road repair and street safety was 8.9 million. And Lone Tree was at 2.5 million. And you can read the rest of it, or everybody can see that Proposition 419 was about 2 million. And that program is just starting. So I want everybody to understand that program is just starting. So there's some projects that are beginning, but we're going to get more into Proposition 419, the new tax, as we go into the next components. But then again, general improvement and partnering that has a little over $163,000 for the city to partner and have opportunities there. So here's the budget for FY23, which is the orange box, if you remember. And here we have $93 million. This is probably one of the highest fiscal year budgets that I can remember. And most of that is due to Proposition 419. So if you're looking ahead, you can kind of see that we have a healthy Proposition 419 fiscal year 23 budget. But included in that is, again, we have HERF at 6.9 million. We have the annual street overlay program, as well as Sunnyside. If you remember, Sunnyside is contingent on the sale of a lot near the auto mall, or the lots near the mall. So if that is sold, then we do get some additional funding for Sunnyside. Under the transportation tax and safety, we still have remnants of the old tax, and the biggest one there is the Beulah University realignment, and that one is budgeted at 21.9 million. So it's basically the entire tax that is shown there, or the amount there for transportation tax, safety, and streets. Then we have road repair and street safety, so we're just finishing out that program. We have the rest of Coconino Estates Phase 2, and then we also have Pulliam Drive that might be coming in some more work in the out years. And also in road repair and street safety is the yearly pavement overlay program, and that typically comes in at $5 million a year that the city does the overlay. We have Lone Tree. The rest of Lone Tree is continuing. We start construction this spring. We have 9.6 million. And then as we get to the next component, the out years, you'll see that that budget gets a little bigger. The appropriations get a little larger because the majority of the construction happens in a couple years. And under Proposition 419, the new tax, we have 31 million. And of those, I'm just going to list a few of the projects to highlight, is the Butler Fourth Improvements, Lone Tree, different components of Lone Tree from Butler to Pine Knoll and Pine Knoll to JWP. We have the Lockett Fourth Roundabout, and then there's plenty of projects within the bike ped, within the foots, and within the first mile, last mile program. So those are all part of the 31 million, so there's a lot there that we need to do and a lot we need to accomplish and deliver, and we're working towards that. So the last one is the general improvement and partnering. Wanted to mention at 10 million. So what we did there is we had a reoccurring 1.5 million set aside for the next 20 years. But what we did there is we pulled 5 years forward. We used what was in our estimate from last year combined, and it comes up at a little under 10 million. And we're using that as our match for grant applications related to the downtown mile. So we also have that ability to pull money forward for opportunities, and we thought this was a great opportunity to keep the city in a match for a grant for a possibility of the downtown mile. So here are the out years of the components. So this is the green box, if you remember. And in the out years for the streets and transportation category, it's 161 budgeted. Again, that's appropriations. It's not real money. And if you can see there, we're anticipating the old tax is gone. So we won't have 6 subcategories, and we will only have 5 going forward after next year. So HERF includes some of the reoccurring amounts. So every year There are categories, subcategories that get reoccurring amounts, so they can use it for the budget year, and then next year they get the same amount, so that it can continue their process, continue what they're working on. So some of those reoccurring under HERF are minor improvements and reserve for improvements, so that the city can identify needs that maybe aren't budgeted, but we can fall under that subcategory. And again, it also includes Sunnyside, and it includes the annual street maintenance for the next 4 years. Road repair and street safety is at 28 million. We have there the yearly pavement maintenance program and Polium Drive that will be appropriated in approximately 2 years. So those two are 26 million. So they make up the majority of the 28 that's identified there in the out years. Lone Tree overpass, you can see there we're at 58 million. So in the out years, fiscal year 24, I believe it's 8 million. And then the two next years is 25 million apiece. So that is going to fund the construction of the bridge. And then we have the new tax, which is Proposition 419. And that is a program that will be underway for the next 20 years. Some of those projects to highlight in out years is JWP Lake Mary to the airport, Butler Fourth improvements, the remaining portions of that, Lone Tree from Butler to Pine Knoll, and Pine Knoll to JWP. So there's some out years for the rest of Lone Tree. We have dark sky lighting that will continue on. And then the West Route 66 corridor is still in place. And then again, we have several projects that will be coming out of 419 for bike and peds, for first mile, last mile, for foots projects. And there we're at 62 million that has been appropriated in the out years. And then last, just the general improvement and partnering, we're at 900,000. And again, that's due to the fact that we pulled some money forward to help with our match for the downtown mile. And last is the total amount of the CIP, and it's at 270 million. And this is just for streets and transportation. So if you kind of relate that or kind of look at that in the total plan, I think we said we were at 657 million. So we're about a third is in streets and transportation. And just to highlight again, the tax, the old tax, transportation tax, safety and streets, no longer will have any appropriations. We're hoping to finish that project or that program after this current fiscal year. Lone Tree Overpass is a 20-year tax levy that began in 2019, and it will continue to go for until 2040 for payment or funding of the project itself. Actual construction will be done in 2026. Under Proposition 419, which is the new tax, is a 21-year program which began in 2020. So that was just a continuation of the old tax. So those are just some highlights of the three components of the CIP. And just wanted to go over some timelines, kind of give the commission some ideas of how we develop the CIP. And it's not capital specific, it's finance, it's budget, it's many city divisions that take a part in this. So in October, we typically receive a request from a division owner, a project owner, and they let us know that they want a project to be added. And then we get that on the table, we get it included, we start moving forward on what it's going to be, when it can happen, when it can be delivered. We also look at projects that are already in the CIP, and depending on the division owner, we can either have them move them forward or move them back. And it just depends on how that works. So that typically is our beginning point in October. November, staff, the project managers start looking at the projects that they're working on, and then they decide if they're going to need more money, new funding, or in some cases they reduce funding because maybe scope has changed or there's some other allocations that go into it. So that happens in November. And then in January, we talk to finance and we actually give them numbers on what we think projects are going to be, what projects, how they're going to be delivered. We call this phase one, essentially, of what capital does to make sure that projects are planned and programmed. If we need new money, we make that request, and then finance is able to help us with readjusting of numbers. So for an example, based on that is when we worked with Beulah University, we had a budget of approximately $17 million. We did have some costs that increased what we were looking at, and we were able to work to increase that budget for this current year to 21.9. So again, we were able to manage how projects fall in and how projects can get moved around. So that happens in January. In March, this past year, we actually did a CIP review with council. So we actually went through, and this was a half-day effort with them that we actually presented all the categories, everything that was in the plan. And they had the opportunity to chime in and actually talk and ask questions about what we did and how it came about, and staff was there. So that happens in March. And then in April, we actually have our actual budget retreat. And then we present the CIP along with the budget in its entirety, go over it, and then council again can just review it, make sure that everything is what they're looking for and then how it's laid out. So an example that happened at the April retreat was the council had made a request for 4 projects. If you can, I'm not sure if the council or the commission had reviewed that budget meeting, but there was 4 projects that the council members had requested for. These were for protected intersections at Beaver and Butler, at San Francisco and Butler, separated bike lanes phase 3, and then the Reardon Road bikeways. So those were 4 projects that were added to the CIP that came from the April budget retreat. So that's just an example of how council can review and look and see what's best and make that determination towards the CIP. And then lastly, in June, that's when the budget is typically adopted for the next fiscal year. So this current year, which is FY23, that budget was adopted on June 21st. So that is the final read, and that was when the budget was adopted for this upcoming year. And the last item I wanted to talk about is the CIP itself. There's been a lot of talk and discussion and thoughts on how the CIP is developed, how it's defined, and how it gets projects incorporated into either the out years or a fiscal year. And so what staff has done, and this is, I've been working on the CIP in capital for several years, but more in detail the last year. And so these are some of the factors, and then talking with staff, these are the main factors that kind of define or maybe even highlight how the CIP is defined and planned. We have bond and proposition initiatives, and these are voter approved. And I believe these are the highest ranking or the highest priority because that's what the citizens have voted on. And again, those are like the road repair and street safety, the new tax, Lone Tree. Those are items that were voted and approved by our citizens. And as a public entity, we have to deliver on those. So that is one factor that can define how the CIP looks. We have programmed and funded projects. So these are divisions that have money, have funding available. They make a request and it gets in the CIP. And depending on how far and when they're ready to go and how far they are in their idea, their plan, it can be moved up or it can be moved back. We also have grant funding. So that's funding that can come about. A good example of that is the community development block grants. So we had received those through housing, and we were able to finish several locations within Southside, within Pine Knoll, Brendan Homes, and La Plaza Vieja for filling in areas that didn't have sidewalk, didn't have curbs. We did some park improvements. So we were able to use this grant through CDBG to get that into the CIP. There's master plans available, so water services, they do have master plans involved, so drinking water, wastewater, reclaimed have these master plans in place. Water treatment plants have master plans for their campus. So those projects can get identified and placed in the CIP. There's also community needs. So the council hears what the public provides. A good example there is the fatalities that the bikers had on Butler Avenue last year. And so from that community need, the separated bike lanes was developed, and that staff initiated and completed both phase 1 and 2 on Butler and Beaver. There's also special requests or critical needs. So a good example of that is the museum flood, the fire that came about from up on the museum flood watershed area. So now we have a lot of projects in Sunnyside that are being developed. Those are getting on the CIP, and they're beginning to get planned, get budgeted, and get completed. And then the last one is boards and commissions. So those ideas, those requests, those plans that come before the commissions and committees can get placed into the CIP. An example there is the Arts and Beautification Committee. They review a lot of their BBB projects and they rank them, and then they explain what they would like, and that's how they get developed and placed into the CIP. So those are just factors that I feel staff has been working towards to develop the CIP, and just going forward on how that document is placed and gets before council, gets before the public, and gets adopted. And so that is basically what I had for this afternoon, and I hope I met my time. Any questions? We also have a few project managers online, virtually, if there's any specific questions for projects.
Thank you very much, Trevor. What is the status of that grant opportunity for the downtown mile where you have the set aside for matching funds?
Christine, do you like to?
Yeah, hi, this is Christine Cameron. I'm project manager for the Rio to Flag Lone Tree Overpass and the downtown mile. So we plan to hear about that grant application, the results in, they say the late fall, but they're anticipating in November. We'll also be entering into a Chrissy grant application with BNSF for the same effort. So again, trying to hit that opportunity on different levels.
Thank you. Well, we look forward to hearing good news late fall. I'm curious, Trevor, about HERF dollars and tracking those and projections. You know, is there a chance that HERF dollars, so gas tax, could be swept, or you know, with the current conditions, are the projections for HERF increasing? Help me understand HERF, please.
So, Madam Chair, under HERF, again, that's at the state level, and that can be, like you mentioned, gas taxes and other taxes related to highway users. And right now, I don't have a really good feel for how that's working currently and projections that can go forward. I would have to actually speak with our finance and budget personnel and just to get a better understanding, but everything is volatile. Prices are going up, escalation, and then even in some places you do see a little bit of cost maybe leveling out, but you just never know what they're going to do. So it's, unless I can actually speak with our budget personnel and our city treasurer, I can't really make a determination or an answer to that, or response.
Yeah, it's definitely some speculation. I was just curious.
But I will write it down.
Thank you. So I know we're going to have some questions and comments from commissioners, and then I have some thoughts and remarks about the CIP moving forward, but I'm going to go to the first hand up, which is Commissioner Kraft. And I would add that Commissioner Kraft chaired the Transportation Tax Commission for propositions 419, 420, and 421. Go ahead, Commissioner Kraft.
Hi, Trevor. Thanks for that. Yeah, based on my past experience, I'm curious about, you mentioned the old tax projects, and I'm just curious what it looks like at the other end of the process when you have funds allocated to those. I think you had 3 major projects that were still needed to be done. So do you track those funds separately so you know what they're for? And then yeah, I'm just curious in general what it looks like at the end of the process, because we're already receiving funds from the new taxes, and we still have some projects left over from the old. So did you end up like, was the tax successful, and did it raise enough funds to finish all the projects?
Commissioner Kraft, thank you for the question. So these are the 3 projects that I highlighted, which was the Schweitzer Turquoise Roundabout, La Plaza Vieja improvements, and Beulah University realignment. And so the first 2 are complete. There's just still some remaining contributions, some expenditures due to ADOT, due to the contractor, because we're closing out the projects, but they are essentially finished, and the funds used came from the old tax. Now, the one project that is still remaining is the Beulah University realignment, and that started under the old tax, and it's continuing under the old tax. It does show up in the old tax category, and it will remain that way until it is finished, it completed. And we're hoping that we can do something this fiscal year to finish it, but if not, we'll get carried over again into the next fiscal year for completion. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, and do you I mean, do you basically keep the funds separate for that from the old tax, that that's earmarked for Beulah, and it doesn't end up getting reallocated somewhere else in the meantime?
Yes, Commissioner Kraft. On the screen, I have that snapshot
Mm-hmm.
of the streets and transportation. And as you can see under the second category, which is the transportation tax funded and safety, transportation tax funded, there's safety and street. So if you can see under streets, it's Beulah University realignment, 21.9 million. There's nothing projected for fiscal year 24, which is the out year, but it's all contained within that old tax category and subcategory. So all of it will be tracked there. It will never get moved. It will never get reassessed or reappropriated. It will always stay in that subcategory.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
All right. Commissioner Dunno.
Thank you, Chair Lead. Thanks, Trevor, for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. I guess I'll start with my questions and then just a couple comments. The first is, I really appreciate seeing the process outlined, how you go about making your internal requests call for your internal projects as to your divisional owners. I am curious, since there is that category for partnerships, if which I know Mountain Line and the city have definitely collaborated on partnering on grants, which is, definitely been a successful with our first mile, last mile effort we're doing now. But I'm wondering if there's like more of a, like an ideal timeline, when you're trying to program what those partnership funds are looking like, if other entities that may have pathways to funding know when it makes sense to come forward with proposals so that you can evaluate which grant opportunities and partnerships instead of just sending them your way when they show up, which may not fit your timeline very well. So I'm kind of curious if that's something that would be helpful to the city to have an opportunity to call for partnerships with other entities that can bring forward grants. So you're able to kind of evaluate in this whole process, right? So that's one question. You don't have to, I suppose, know an answer, but
I can. Thank you, Interim Commissioner Dunno. Thank you for the question. I put back on the screen our yearly timeline. In a perfect world scenario, we would like to have that information, excuse me, maybe in October or November to start that process, start talking. But any time of the year, if an opportunity comes up, we can look at what we have currently in the CIP, and especially under that general improvements and opportunity, if there's enough budget, there to partner, to do something with a project that comes in, say from ADOT, any time of the year we can look at what we're able to do, what's allowable, and that can happen anytime. I mean, we're not committed to this timeline. So if we get something, say in November, or actually if we get something in January that should have been in October, we'll still look at it. But in a perfect world, this is kind of our scenario.
That's helpful. I'll share that internally for our own planning.
Okay.
A second, I guess, comment or question would be about the master plan. You identified your different divisions, obviously water and sewer, that have master plans, and was wondering if there was ever a conversation about having a streets master plan so that it would identify corridor planning at the arterial and collector, all the major streets in town, identifying the full build out opportunities to show future right-of-way, future, cross sections, so that developers, and again, partnering, it's more of a transparent process. Just wondering if that's ever been considered.
So Interim Commissioner Dunno, thank you for the question. As far as a master plan for how streets, I think there's times that we do fall back on the regional transportation plan. We look at that. We look at developments that might be occurring in the area, but there really, to my knowledge, there isn't a master plan on how streets are developed other than the regional transportation plan that we typically go through. And then even if we do have a project, a development that comes in, we do look at our street sections. We do look through transportation on how the networking falls into place, impact analyses, corridor studies, kind of fall into that place, which could take the place of maybe a master plan, but then it focuses only on the smaller area, not a bigger area. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I guess more holistically when you're looking at impacts for development and or any type of change in a corridor, you're looking holistically about those improvements, but just a comment. And the other one was, I guess, opportunities. I'm not aware for grants. There was a recent notice from, I think, FHWA about a PROTECT grant that is federal funds that flows through the state that you can partner with local agencies to improve surface transportation facilities, streets that are impacted by floods and other, climate action type of impacts. So just curious, just wanted to throw that out there and just put that bug in your ear if you're looking for other revenue sources.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate that. I will note that down, and we'll get with our grants and contracts manager, Stacy Reckler-Nags, and she might be able to foster us or help us go in the right path if that's something the city wants to go towards.
It's called a PROTECT grant through FHWA.
Yeah, FHWA, we get the listserv through FTA, but it's through FHWA. It just was passed, and I just looked at the email, so it looked like it'd be something potentially eligible, but again, requires, working with city budget process and all of that. I had one more item, and I'm looking at the West Route 66. You mentioned partnership opportunities, which is West Route 66, of course, is an ADOT right-of-way. I believe that is still on the Metropolitan Planning Organization's work plan to develop a corridor or a study to look at improvements on West Route 66. So you might check in with Metroplan on that and partnering to bring it to the next level for improvements. Just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't see it on the list anywhere, so just thought I'd mention it.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that. So from what I know about West Route 66 corridor study, initially it was from Milton Road to Flag Ranch Road, but we had a development, I might get this wrong, but I think it's Timber Sky, that happened on the very west end, which did some improvements or has some commitments there. ADOT did Route 66 from Milton to Woodlands Village Boulevard. So I think that may have already been accounted for. So what we're looking for is a potentially from Woody Mountain Way to Woodlands Village Boulevard. So that would be part of the corridor study for West Route 66. And if I remember correctly, I think we had some appropriations of about 10 million, maybe 11 million for that, towards any improvements that come out of the corridor study with ADOT.
Did you have a sense of the timeline on that corridor study? Because I haven't heard. I sit on Metroplan TAC, so and we haven't met in a couple of months, so I don't know where that sits.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I did see it on the CIP, and I know it's in the out years. And I want to say it's 2 or 3 years out. So maybe FY26, potentially something could happen there construction-wise. I'm pretty sure confident the corridor study can get completed before then. And that's just a matter of the ADOT and the city getting together to finish that.
I guess they haven't started it yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they have.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right, do we have any members of the public for this particular item that have a question or comment? I do see a couple of names in the Teams meeting that are perhaps members of the public, so I just want to do a quick check. All right, so I do want to offer one comment for you, Trevor. Thank you so much for this information. If you wouldn't mind scrolling back to the schedule or the dates, that would be helpful. So one thing in our charter as commissioners is we are the Transportation Tax Oversight Commission. And we are an advisory commission to City Council. So one of our responsibilities is to review those expenditures and those projects, and then to make those recommendations to council. So what I would really like, what I hope for and ask for in moving forward is, as the CIP is developed and as it is presented to council as part of the budget and part of the retreat, that there is an opportunity for the Transportation Commission to be part of that conversation and be part of that process, especially looking at what was presented to voters and that list of capital projects, and also just being able to answer questions that we may hear, with the public about, projects, for example, project costs increasing. Does that mean we're not going to get another project because this one particular project materials costs are so high, or things like that? So to perhaps have that engagement earlier on, I think would be very welcome by the commission. If that's something that you can help make happen, Trevor, and that Jeff and Steph can also help make happen, that would be the ask in moving forward.
Yes, Chair Lead, we can do that. I will talk with Jeff, talk with Transportation, and then we'll get through maybe at the early part of the year, January, we can start talking about how we can include the Transportation Commission on how this is developed and how this is planned and moved and brought forward. We can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the overview, and also really getting a better understanding of all of the different revenue sources. I think that was really helpful for me and perhaps others on commission tonight. There are just a lot of different pots of money for what's funding our infrastructure in Flagstaff, and it's good to understand those different pots of money. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to our final agenda item, or new business, I should say. And that would be the Bikeways plan. So this is information discussion, no formal action is required. Welcome, Martin, take it away. And I should check, I see your screen. Do our commissioners online see the screen? I see a head shake, no.
I got it now. It's good.
Intent.
Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lead, members of the commission. I'll go fairly quickly, but if there's any follow-up questions, we can hold it over to another meeting. And we've not provided this presentation to you in as a file, but we can do so after the meeting. You can take a look and that way as well. So our intent here tonight is just to talk about separated bike lanes and really thinking beyond separated bike lanes beyond the pilot project on Butler and Beaver, and thinking about them in a different configuration and in potentially different locations and applications. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this is because the city has a couple of roadway projects that are underway in the planning phases where we are planning to use separated bikeways, separated bike lanes. And those projects are Lone Tree, including the intersection at Lone Tree and Butler, and the one that will be coming up fairly quickly, which is Butler between Little America and 4th Street. So given that we're starting to plan for these facilities, we wanted to make sure that you knew what they were all about, how we've thought about them to date, and how we might implement them as we move forward. And I might also mention that at the Bicycle Advisory Committee and to some extent even at the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, we've had a lot of conversation about where these things will go, what they look like, how they'll function, and some of that detail. So just to make sure that we have kind of a common understanding, separated bike lanes are either horizontally separated by physical distance, they're moved off of the roadway, or they're separated vertically by some physical vertical element. And here's a couple, and they're also, we call them separated bike lanes, but I think they're also commonly referred to as protected bike lanes, so you may have heard that terminology used. Here's a couple of images of vertical separation, a curb, Jersey barriers. I think if you Googled protected bike lanes, you'd see a lot of images that just use the candlesticks or the delineators.
Hi, Mom. How are you doing? I'm doing good. I got you.
We can discuss how much protection or separation that actually involves, but generally in common usage, they are referred to as protected bike lanes as well. And then the horizontal variety, which is kind of what we're talking about here, like I mentioned, provides some distance between where the bike lane is on the street and where it's moved off, typically adjacent to the sidewalk behind a parkway. Here's the flavor that we're talking about in Flagstaff. So we have literally just picked the bike lane up and moved it behind the parkway to be adjacent to the sidewalk. So no longer anything on the street, but the bike lanes are separated. And that's just a comparison to our current practice of conventional bike lanes. So separated bike lanes are part of the Bikeways plan. I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail, but the Bikeways plan is intended to use a variety of facilities, and separated bike lanes are just one of those facilities. There are a handful of other ones as well. That's an image of the Bikeways plan. Our main focus is on the purple lines, which are designated as primary bikeways. Those would be the main ones that you would use to get across town to destinations. So kind of if you think of it in terms of functional class, those would be like the arterials for cross-town travel. And probably the chief characteristic or feature that we want to incorporate into the Bikeways plan is that it be low stress. And that means that bicycle riders of all ages and ability, no matter where you are in experience level or your circumstances, you feel comfortable on most of the network. Our intent is to appeal to a broad section of the population that's referred to as interested but concerned bicyclists, and this, by some estimates, is up to 60% of the population. So these are people who individuals who would like to bicycle more, but only feel comfortable when really comfortable facilities are provided. So a typical bike lane, for example, may not be comfortable enough. A foot trail probably is. And here's a little bit better description of it. This actually comes from Federal Highways. They've kind of adopted this terminology. You can see on the left is the interested but concerned, and at the bottom, comfortable for most people, including beginners, are shared use pathways and neighborhood streets. And then as we move to the right, the terminology they use is somewhat confident and then highly confident cyclists, and there are corresponding facilities where they would feel comfortable as well. And that is an adaptation from the original Portland categories, which you see here. They use different terminology. So they're a third of the population they considered no way, no how. So people who, for whatever reason, can't ride or won't ride. The 60% interested but concerned, and then the two high-end categories they called enthused and confident at about 7%, and strong and fearless at 1%. So those have been replaced by somewhat confident and highly confident by FHWA. Anyway, so our intent really for separated bikeways is to appeal to that 60%. If we can get a handful of people in that category to ride their bike more for more trips, we make a significant dent in traffic and how we get around town. So it's a very worthwhile effort. Probably the biggest cause of stress for most cyclists is either being in traffic or adjacent to traffic on busy streets. So if we separate people from traffic, that reduces that stress level. We think of the bikeways in terms of three different categories: shared streets, dedicated space, which would include conventional bike lanes, and then separated facilities, which is what we're talking about here. And there is good empirical data. These things are not new. They've been around for 10 years or more. So we're seeing some empirical data about how they work and what cyclists prefer. And I'll focus it on a couple of studies on the latter. I'll show you some results from a survey of about a little more than 1,000 cyclists in 5 different metro areas. And they were asked hypothetically how they would feel on a roadway that's 35 miles per hour, a commercial street, and had 4 lanes of traffic and on-street parking. And then they were asked about a variety of conditions. And here were the main results. And you can see at the top, on that kind of a street when no bike lane is provided, if you look all the way over to the right, the 2 blue columns add up to 9%. So 9% of respondents said they would feel either comfortable or very comfortable on a street like that. And then as you move down to the bottom, if a separated pathway was provided, that number increases to 93% of cyclists would feel comfortable or very comfortable on a street like that. So a huge difference in comfort level. And I think you have to believe that would translate to a difference in behavior as well, right? Like a lot more people would choose to ride if there were a pathway along that kind of a street. And then one step up, you can see separated bike lanes, which is what we're talking about here. And the survey divided separated bike lanes, and they talked about different types of separation, and we don't have to dwell on this too much. I think it's kind of interesting information. But you can see from planters to raised curbs to parked cars, what barriers between the bike lane and traffic made bicyclists feel more or less comfortable. And again, these were hypothetical. They were shown images, so not actually based on their real experience. We also have some of our own local data that we collected in conjunction with the pilot bike lane evaluation, and we did something very similar. We showed 4 different images of different types of bike lanes and then asked the respondents to tell us how comfortable they would feel in a kind of a hypothetical situation. And the one that stood out from the rest is when we asked how comfortable would you feel riding in a horizontally separated bike lane on a busy street, and then showed them the image that you see on the screen. 75% of respondents said they would feel very comfortable, and only a very few said they would feel uncomfortable. And this slide kind of compares it to the other types of bike lanes, but I won't go into detail, but suffice it to say that separated bike lanes scored the highest on that comfort meter by a significant margin. 2 other pieces of data I think are important to talk about just in terms of why this is important and what we're moving towards. And the first is one piece of information on mode share trends. And this is collected from Journey to Work numbers as part of the American Community Survey. So they do this every year. These happen to be 5-year averages, so these numbers are kind of rolling. So for example, the numbers that show for 2020 are actually from the period of 2016 to 20, so for that 5-year period. So here we can see the blue line in the middle. We kind of peaked on transportation to work by bicycle in 2014 at 5%. We've been declining steadily since to, in 2020, we're down to 2.5%. And you can see numbers for walking and transit as well. And again, this is journey to work, so it's only work commute. It doesn't include like errands or even school commute for respondents. And then the other piece of information that I think relates to this is from a survey that was done earlier this year by Metroplan. And this is a random sample telephone survey. And they ask people to divide up according to time how they travel around, like what percentage of their time do they drive, what percentage are they in transit for their travel. And then they ask them, what would you like to be doing in 10 years, or how do you see yourself in 10 years? So the blue line represents where they are now. The red line represents where they'd like to be in 10 years. And if you look at the bottom, travel by car, automobile, currently is 77% of respondents' time, but in 10 years they would like that to be 57%. And if you skip up to bicycling, it's currently 5% of travel by time, but people would like it to be 14%. So in other words, there's a big unmet demand for people are interested in traveling by bike. And to me, I think this is sort of a very clear call to action for us to provide more comfortable facilities, to do better for bicycling and bikeways, and to appeal to more of that 60% interested but concerned as a way of switching trips from automobile to bicycle and other modes as well. When we went through the bikeways plan, one of the questions was, where do we determine where separated bike lanes should be used? We looked at 3 different factors. The first and probably most important being speed and volume of traffic on the street. The second being the hierarchy or the class of the bikeway, and simply higher level bikeways like the primary routes are more likely to receive separated facilities given that they're more important. And then finally, that we looked at some important considerations regarding if it's new construction or a new street versus a retrofit or existing streets. And on speed and volume, this is a reproduction of a chart from a federal highways document that shows a graph of volume, ADT, average daily traffic on streets on the vertical axis, and then across the bottom is speed in miles per hour. This one is a little challenging for me to read, but you can see at about 6,500 vehicles per day and between 30 and 35 miles per hour. The recommendation is to move from dedicated space or conventional bike lanes to separated bike lanes. Now, 6,500 vehicles per day and 30 to 35 miles per hour pretty much includes all of our arterials and most of our at least our major collector streets. And then you can see also toward the bottom is where you switch from shared space, like shared lane markings, or bike routes or bike boulevards, to dedicated space like bike lanes. I mentioned the considerations for new versus existing streets. Existing streets are always a retrofit condition, so we're trying to fit something in that didn't have that before. We have very tight space in Flagstaff on our streets existing, so finding new space, if it takes additional space, is always a challenge. That kind of conversion tends to be very complicated and expensive as construction, but there is kind of a path that you can trace out from going from bike lanes to buffered bike lanes to vertically separated to horizontally separated bike lanes. And it's that last step that I think is the most expensive, because you're essentially reconstructing the side of the road. Now, one of the things that Trevor mentioned about money for plans is going to look at the cost of retrofitting existing streets from having conventional on-street bike lanes to a separated facility. So we'll know where there are good candidates and what that will cost. But you know, be forewarned, or maybe this is a spoiler alert, it's going to be expensive, we think. New streets give us a little bit more opportunity. Any place that a street is being built brand new, like John Wesley Powell extension, or where it's being significantly reconstructed, like 4th Street or Butler, we have an opportunity to incorporate these, and that's really where we're kind of focusing our efforts. Now, this is actually fairly limited. And I didn't realize, I knew that in my head, but I didn't realize it until I mapped it. These are really our opportunities for that. And I don't believe in using labels on maps, so you're going to have to figure it out for where you are for yourself. But it's John Wesley Powell, Lone Tree, Route 66 on the west side, Woody Mountain Road extending down are all opportunities for us. You know, if we have the money or there are grants or we find other opportunities, we can retrofit existing streets. That's not reflected on this map, but still a possibility, but we think that will be expensive. We've talked a lot about how foots are used as bikeways, and in the past, our pattern has been to provide on-street bike lanes for people who are comfortable using them, and then a foots trail adjacent to it for people who are not comfortable being on the street. And that generally works fairly well, but it really kind of covers the two ends of that spectrum of cyclists that we saw. So the people who are kind of at the low end of interested but concerned find foots trails appealing, and the people who are at the other end are willing to ride on bike lanes on the street. And that's not a perfect analogy. I mean, it really varies by foots trail or bike lane how well they work. But in general terms, foots don't always make great bikeways for a variety of reasons. So the concept is if we're able to provide facilities on street that are comfortable for a wide range of cyclists, then foots can really be free to be a different kind of system. Right now we have, our foots is essentially two different systems, one being generally unpaved trails that go through natural areas and you know, people run on, and there's some commuting, but you know, they don't really work in the winter, and they're not as direct of connections. And then the second system is a side path where we've built them to be kind of an alternative for people riding on the street. And so if we do better on street, then foots really can become kind of a separate system. And again, here, this is a map that shows where we have either existing foots or planned foots as side paths. And part of our scheme with the separated is that we get away from that for future construction. It's a little bit of a challenge where we've already started a street, like John Wesley Powell, for example, has bike lanes and a foots trail. Like how we continue the new parts of that to have separated bike lanes, but we're working through that. We're almost done here. Intersections are an important component, and again, these are often referred to as protected intersections or protected roundabouts. We use the term separated. Here's a schematic of it. Here's an actual on-the-ground example in Davis, California, and another one in Salt Lake City. So these have been around. They're actually, I take you through how they work, but I've got a couple of videos at the end that you can look at on your own to see how they work. And they're actually, they seem complicated, but when you break it down, they're really, really very simple. And it mostly involves just green paint in different places. And we can apply the same principles to roundabouts as well. And in fact, the one at Bulin University is going to include these, this kind of design. A few things just real quickly to wrap up. On maintenance and operation. For snow removal, these facilities will be 11 feet wide, so they can use the equipment the city already has and the technology that we already know to clean them off. It is an additional obligation because it's something we're not doing now. So as we build new ones, it's something new for the city to maintain, but we have the equipment and the know-how to do it. Materials, we've gotten away from asphalt on foots trails and use concrete. We've included a couple of minor design tweaks that help make a really smooth riding surface, and it involves how we treat the control joints and expansion joints to make it good for cycling. Marking and striping has really two goals. One is to really clearly differentiate the walking side, so the sidewalk, from the bike side. And then two is to make sure that the bike side is directional. We don't intend these to be two-way facilities for bikes. We want them to be like a bike lane, to be going in the same direction of traffic on that side of the street. Transitions is just how we get from these facilities to other kinds of facilities, and that can be either the separated intersections do really well at that, or in a lot of cases just ramps from off-street to on-street, or from on-street to off-street. Street width, this concept actually reduces a typical street by about 3 feet. So by moving the bike lanes off, we save about 3 feet of space overall. There is a little bit of a question about what's left in the street, and is it wide enough for emergency vehicles and snow removal and other things. But if it's a 2-lane or 4-lane road with a median, that seems to work. If it's a 2-lane road without a median, that seems to work as well. But just some details that we're working through. And then finally, we need to update our engineering standards to include details for these, so people, when we want to have them built, people know what they should look like and all the details. And all these links do you no good on the screen, but we will provide the PowerPoint to you. There are also a bunch of resources, and those tend to be a little bit longer and go into a lot of detail. But I think if you watch these videos, it's pretty educational. I think you'll get a good idea of what the intent is and how they work. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you prefer, we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Martin. I know this is something that you've been working on for years. The BAC and PAC has been reviewing, and you've done quite a bit of public outreach as well, and surveys. There's a lot of time, energy, and thought that's gone into this. And I'm looking at the time, and I know the importance of this conversation that we need to have about the Bikeways plan. So I would ask, of course, want to open it up to commissioners if there are any questions, but I would like to continue this conversation for our next Transportation Commission meeting, which I believe on the agenda there's a request to have a special meeting related to the ATMP. And I know the Bikeways plan is one piece, one big component of the ATMP. So I think that having the combination of those two items and being able to discuss that overall with the ATMP would be an appropriate time to do so, if that's acceptable to folks. But I do want to open it up for questions of Martin, just kind of in preparation for what our next meeting might be. Right. Hearing your seat. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lead, and thank you, Martin, for that presentation. So having attended many of the Bicycle Advisory Committee meetings for the past number of years, I've seen how this process kind of morphed from the Futz and Every road to the separated bike systems. I want to say overall, I agree that the separated bike systems are a desirable endpoint. I guess my main question is, when you showed the map of, realistically where these will be implemented, we're going to end up with just a very fractured system in Flagstaff. And, even on Butler, it's going to go from not having it to having it for a mile, then not having it again. And you're going to end up under the underpass of the 40. And so, yeah, I guess maybe for next time, for now, but just a question of how are we going to implement those, and what's the better, is there a reconciling point in the future where we'll have all the same thing, or how do we think about this mixed system in Flagstaff for the foreseeable next 20 years, whatever that's going to be?
How do you make those elegant transitions to existing infrastructure? Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how do we make the existing infrastructure better, even if it's not always separated?
All right, Commissioner Cruikshank, and then Commissioner Dunno.
Hey, Martin, it's Brandon. It's nice to see you virtually.
You also.
Thanks for the presentation. I've missed your presentations, not being on the PAC anymore. So just a quick question. I really do like these horizontally separated bikeways. My one concern, and you did show the protected intersections, but what do you do like at just a normal street crossing? So right-hand turn, left-hand turn from a vehicle, how do you protect the cyclist in that situation? Because a cyclist to me is harder to see separated than if they were on the roadway.
Yeah, I think there's a few design features that can be used. Some places use green paint across the conflict zone to kind of highlight it as a crossing. We could look at design features like a corner radius, some visibility aspects to try to make it a little bit safer where vehicles are turning across the bike lane, and that would apply to kind of local streets as well as to driveways.
Okay, yes, thank you. And that's just a quick comment. I'm assuming that pedestrians like facilities like this as well, where you're gonna have the separated bike pedway together.
Yeah, we were careful to let the pedestrian committee, you may recall, kind of review these things and kind of think about it from the perspective of a pedestrian who now has essentially a bike lane next to a sidewalk, to make sure that that's comfortable. There are design features at the intersections that help make it safer for pedestrians where they're crossing the bike lane, as well as travel lanes. And I had a third point, but I don't remember.
Okay. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Are there any questions or additional requests of Martin? For information that you would want to see or know at our next commission meeting? Okay, and then I think Commissioner Dono, you had a question, comment?
Just a comment, it struck me, I think it was Commissioner Kraft, JK up on the screen, that struck me with the comment about the fractured nature, which is, I mean, definitely looking at these different opportunities that Martin mentioned for separated bikeways. But again, it goes back to that, what is our transportation street network master plan ultimately call for? You know, if you can bring all these pieces together, they all have to fit together in a system. So I just wanted to make that connection again. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, there is no old business. For concluding general business, the reports from the pedestrian and bicycle advisory committees are contained in that link. That is included in the agenda packet. And moving to informational items 2 from commissioners and staff. And I will start with staff. Stephanie, are there any updates you would like to provide under this item?
Yes, if we have the time, we've got the 3 updates for the neighborhood plan. Is that okay? They should go fairly quick.
Yep, if you would keep it pretty brief, I'd appreciate it.
Awesome, thanks. David's gonna come up here and give those real quick.
Oh, yeah. Hello, Madam Chair. Hello, Transportation Commission. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, all right, I'll go through these real quick. So we have an update for the Boulder Point traffic calming project, which includes raised crosswalks in Woody Way and the traffic circles on University Avenue. And we do have a cost estimate now that we've worked with a capital PM to achieve, which was just under $340,000 for the whole project. And it is higher than we expected, and we attribute that to inflation and rising construction costs that we've seen everywhere. And so that's the first update. The second update was for Fremont, which we are trying to restripe as a single lane road at each direction. Yeah. And we have 90% striping plans completed, and we are working on a cost estimate for that with a capital PM as well. And finally, for Mount Pleasant, we have striping plans completed for that road as an advisory bike lane. And we've created a website and door hangers to show people how to use advisory bike lanes because they are a new striping pattern. And we're hoping to get that striped by our streets crew, but we're still working with them because they might need us to have it contracted because they have a lot of striping to do this season and they might not be able to get to it in time. But those are our 3 updates.
Where does that $340,000 come from?
That is a good question. We are still trying to figure out exactly where we will find that money.
Thank you. Any questions for David? Thank you. Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you.
Informational items to from commissioners. All right. Next meeting, we are proposing a special meeting for September 7th. This will be continuation of the Bikeways discussion and the ATMP. So please look for an email from Jeff Bauman or Steph asking for quorum and availability, if that works for you. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting is October 5th, and I'll be working on that agenda with staff. If there's anything on this list that you are particularly interested in having that rise to be top of our old business items for October, please send an email about that. We can make sure it gets included. I really try to manage the time that we have together effectively and keep these to 2 hours, which we did really well. And then to be able to continue conversations when needed. So I appreciate your time and be safe. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Thanks, Julie.